A sniper named the Reaper with 33 confirmed kills over the course of just 4 months. New York Times best-selling author of The Reaper and Way of the Reaper, author of Reaper the Board, served 6 years in U.S. Army Special Operations 3rd Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. You're the first African American to deploy into the global war on terrorism.
I got the name Reaper from a few guys on my team during my last deployment to Afghanistan. And
They called him the Reaper, but before the name, before the legend, there was a man walking a razor's edge between myth and mortality. Nick Irving doesn't look like a killer. When he speaks, it's measured. It's quiet, precise, like someone still calculating the distance to something unseen, a kind of calm that only comes from living with chaos long enough to master it. In his world, silence isn't peace, it's awareness. Every flicker of movement, he registers it, catalogs it. That's what years of war do, they rewire you. When I came home, people said I looked fine. He replied, they couldn't see my mind was still overseas. To understand how the Reaper came to be, you have to go back to a boy born in the shadow of America's secret wars. Augsburg, Germany, 1986, the son of 2 U.S. Army intelligence officers, raised at Fort Meade, Maryland, the home of the NSA, where secrets breathe longer than people. He grew up where soldiers spoke in code, and silence meant safety. His father demanded perfection, a bed made with hospital corners, shoes lined heel to toe. He wasn't loud, but he noticed everything. The change in a man's tone, how wind bent grass, the rhythm of silence. Even then, he was trying to prove he could be enough to his father, to the legacy that raised him, because long before Nick Irving ever picked up a rifle, war had already found him. Fort Meade taught him order, his father taught him control. Dyslexia taught him frustration and focus. Letters danced on pages, but patterns made sense. Shapes, distance, timing. What made school a battlefield made the battlefield instinctive. At 10, he was timing tin can shots with a BB gun. At 12, slowing his heartbeat before firing. By 17, he wanted to be a Navy SEAL. He passed everything until the color vision test failed. Red and green blurred together. Dream denied. It broke me, he said. I thought my life was over before it started. But Nick doesn't stay broken. He redirected that pain into purpose. The U.S. Army Rangers didn't care about color blindness, they cared about will. At Fort Benning, they stripped him bare. Starvation, exhaustion, pain. Ranger School doesn't build soldiers, it exposes them. He found calm where others panicked. Most people panic when the world slows down. I get sharper. He earned his Ranger tab, then entered sniper school where patience becomes a weapon. He learned to read the mirage, calculate bullet drift, time shots between heartbeats. He wasn't just accurate, he was still. The first black sniper in the 3rd Battalion, soon to become its deadliest, 21 years old when he boarded the plane to Iraq, and behind him, structure and expectation. Ahead, chaos, blood, and legend. 8 hours after landing in Iraq, he was in a firefight. 8 hours to become what the Army trained him to be. Dirty Dinah, his SR-25 rifle never left his side. He cleaned her more than he slept. If she worked, I survived. In Afghanistan, Nick became the Reaper, a name whispered by enemies, respected by brothers, feared by the men who never saw him but always felt him. But nicknames don't retire. They don't stay on the battlefield. They come home with you. When Nick boarded that plane back to America, he wasn't the kid from Fort Meade anymore. He wasn't just a sniper or a ranger or even a soldier. He was a weapon without a mission, a blade with nothing left to cut. And there's nothing more dangerous or more painful than a tool with no purpose, because when the Reaper came home, that's when Nick Irving started to disappear. Brotherhood in war isn't something you talk about, it's something you carry. It's the way someone hands you their last sip of water without a word, the way a man will step in front of gunfire for you without hesitation, the silent nods before a raid, that unspoken promise. If one of us goes down, none of us goes alone. Nick found that kind of connection in his Ranger platoon men who joked through exhaustion, bled through fear, and laughed in the face of death because the alternative was breaking down. We didn't talk about dying. We just talked about tomorrow. Even on nights we weren't sure tomorrow was coming. There were men he trusted with his life, but one stood out, Corporal Benjamin Kopp, a soldier, all grit, no quit, the kind of ranger who ran toward danger with purpose, not bravado. Ben wasn't just a teammate, he was the brother you get to choose, the kind of man you argue with one minute and risk your life for the next. Loyal, relentless, fearless, the guy everyone wanted on their left flank. Helmand Province, 2009. The day the silence broke, the mission was routine until it wasn't. A sniper pinned their squad. Ambush fire rained down so heavy it turned dirt into smoke. They dove into a crater barely 4 feet deep. 6 Rangers, 1 tiny patch of earth, and hope thinning by the minute. For 19 hours they fought dehydrated, disoriented, half-conscious, but unwilling to quit. Nick started the firefight with 210 rounds. By the end, he had 6 bullets between life and death. Ben was hid in the chaos, a shot that came from nowhere and everywhere. Rangers dragged him out under fire, refusing to leave him behind. He was medevaced to Walter Reed, clinging to life the way Rangers cling to hope. Nick prayed, he waited, he replayed the firefight in his head, wondering if he could have shifted an inch, taken a different angle, spotted the glint of that enemy rifle sooner. Days later, Ben passed away, but even in death, he saved a life. His heart was donated to a woman in Chicago. It still beats inside her chest. A warrior's heart carrying on. Nick would talk about that moment years later, eyes distant, voice quieter. You start to think maybe you used someone else's luck. Because in war, survival doesn't feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like death. Ben's death wasn't just a loss, it was a turning point. A crack in the armor Nick had built around himself. A reminder that even the strongest brotherhood can't stop fate, and that every kill, every mission, every breath after Helmand came with a weight he couldn't shake. After Helmand, something inside Nick broke, and something else took its place. Fear disappeared, hesitation evaporated. The trembling human reactions that used to anchor him simply weren't there anymore. What replaced them wasn't bravery, it was emptiness. Afghanistan didn't just sharpen him, it hollowed him out. From June to September 2009, Nick operated at a tempo that most men couldn't survive, let alone sustain. 33 confirmed kills, including 6 high-value Taliban commanders. But the number only tells part of the story. There were the shots he took, the shots he didn't take, the shots he replayed at 3 a.m., and the ones he tried to forget before the sun came up. The Taliban started whispering about a ghost in the hills, a rifle that struck without warning, a shadow that moved without sound. They called him the Devil of Sperwangar, but his brothers called him something else, the Reaper. Nick didn't ask for the name, it was given to him the way the war gives you scars you don't choose. Rituals of a man on the edge before missions, he whispered to Dirty Diana, not out of superstition but out of habit, like a man greeting the only thing that never lied to him. He wore the same gloves on every operation. He checked each magazine 3 times. He tapped the stock of his rifle twice before chambering a round, just small rituals that kept the chaos predictable. Rangers would joke about it, but quietly, not out of disrespect but out of recognition. They knew what happened when a soldier became more ritual than man. He could read wind from the way dust lifted off his own breath. He could calculate distance in the space between 2 heartbeats. Under fire, his pulse stayed so calm that medics used his vitals and training as the definition of composure. It was impressive. It was terrifying because deep down everyone knew men don't get that calm unless something inside them has gone quiet forever. Nick expected the plane ride home to feel like release. Instead, it felt like suspension, like he was hovering between 2 worlds belonging to neither. He stepped onto American soil with the posture of a man still expecting gunfire. Every noise was a cue, every shadow a threat, every silence a trap. He tried to smile for the families waiting in the airport terminal, but the muscles in his face felt unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone else. Because the truth about war is this, your body returns home long before your mind does. Nick tried to fall back into normal life, but normal felt like a language he no longer spoke. Grocery stores overwhelmed him, the fluorescent lights, the crowds, the doors he couldn't watch simultaneously. All of it felt like a firefight with no cover. He scanned rooftops without thinking. He judged the distance between cars at stoplights, calculating angles of fire. He sat with his back to walls in restaurants, eyes on every exit. His family saw him sitting at the dinner table, but mentally he was still on overwatch. People think PTSD is about fear, he later said. Half of it is awareness. The other half is the guilt of being aware when nobody else feels it. He stopped sleeping, stopped talking, stopped laughing. Every night he heard the echo of shots that had already been fired and the silence of the ones he wished he could take back, and the faces, always the faces. The worst part wasn't the nightmares, it was the mornings, the false calm, the quiet routines of a world that hadn't seen what he'd seen. He'd sit on the edge of his bed for hours, staring at the floor, trying to convince himself that nothing needed to be cleared, that there was no raid briefing, no mission to plan. But when a man has lived with purpose for so long, the absence of mission feels like death. The battlefield had rules, he said. Home didn't. He drank not because he enjoyed it, but because the silence was too loud. Whiskey turned down the volume of his memories. For an hour, maybe two, the war would quiet down enough for him to breathe without shaking. But the numbness never lasted, and each time it took more to get there. It wasn't one moment that broke Nick, it was 1,000 small ones, the missed calls, the cancelled plans, the nights spent awake, the guilt of living when brothers like Benjamin Kopp were gone. One night the weight of it all became too heavy. He loaded his Glock, not out of rage, not out of impulse, but out of exhaustion, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that war plants in you and peace makes unbearable. He sat there, the metal cold against his skin, not crying, not panicking, just tired. I killed so many overseas. That night, I almost killed one more, but something, memory, instinct, grace, stopped him. Maybe he saw Ben's face. Maybe he felt Ben's heart still beating somewhere in the world. He put the gun down, and for the first time in years, Nick breathed without squeezing a trigger. It wasn't healing, it was survival, but survival was enough. Nick checked into therapy, the bravest act he'd ever performed. He walked into those sessions like he walked into firefights, unsure, tense, ready to bolt. Talking about the war felt harder than being in it. How do you explain to someone what it feels like to kill from a distance, to take a life before the mind has time to feel the consequence? Words didn't come easily, so he turned to writing. He wrote for hours, sometimes in the dark, sometimes with shaking hands, until memories that once terrified him became sentences he could control. Those pages became chapters. Those chapters became the Reaper. I didn't write it to be a hero. I wrote it so I didn't have to carry everything alone. The book didn't just help him, it helped thousands of veterans who saw themselves in his transparency, men and women who finally realized they weren't broken, just hurting. In 2016, Nick held his newborn son for the first time. The child's breath was soft, steady, human, free. For the first time in years, Nick felt something warm instead of heavy. I realized I still had something left to protect, and this time I could do it without killing. Fatherhood didn't erase his pain, but it gave the pain purpose. He traded rifle drills for diaper changes, mission planning for bedtime stories, hypervigilance for gentle patience. It wasn't easy, but it was the kind of hard that heals you instead of hollowing you out. As Nick rebuilt himself, he realized something powerful. If his story could save him, it could save others. He became a voice for veterans who couldn't speak. He visited schools, group homes, bases, prisons, anyone who needed to hear the truth about war and the long walk home. The hardest part of war isn't leaving it, he said. It's finding the courage to come back to yourself. He answered calls from struggling veterans at 2 a.m., talked men out of suicide, helped others enter rehab, raised awareness for PTSD, addiction, and veteran homelessness. He didn't just rebuild himself, he became a map for others trying to rebuild too. The war never leaves you, he said. You just learn to walk beside it,